Good, thank you.
This is the perfect Gemara. Today is all about secrets of a long life. That's the name of the whole block. Okay, so that's the secret of the. This is the whole Gemara that we're going to be learning today. Today's daf, Be'ezus Hashem, is daf Chav Ches, and we'll be beginning Chav Zayin and Beis about 9 lines from the bottom. Zalfan. These are the names as the simon to remember it. Listen to this. Shalu Talmidav es Rabbi Zakkai. They asked the Talmidim. The students asked Rabbi Zakkai, B'meh harachti yamim. With what merit were you merited a long life? B'meh harachti yamim. Amar lehem, he said like this. We learned before, now you have to understand, we didn't have minyanim, you can grab a white shul minyan on the hour. If you had to daven mincha, you pulled over in the street and you davened your mincha. But that's not a shul, you daven privately. But then the halacha is that if you need to urinate, if you need to go to the bathroom, you could go in the exact same place that you just prayed because it's not a shul. The din is that you have to wait like a half a minute, and then you could urinate on the spot that you made Shemoneh Esrei. That's the Gemara we learned before. But Amar lehem, so Rabbi Zakkai said the reason why I merited a long life, he said, Miyomai lishtanti mayim besoich dalar ameshal tefillah. Within the 4 cubits that I prayed, I never urinated in that space. And technically, min hadin, he was allowed to urinate because after you finish praying, the place itself is not holy. But he had this chumrah that if he had to make, he would distance himself 8 feet from that place. Fascinating. V'loi kinisi shem lechaveri, and I never called my friend by his nickname. Okay, let alone if it's derogatory, but even if it's not derogatory, I made sure to use his real full name. He says, that's the secret of my long life. And the third thing I did is v'loi bitalti kiddush hayom. Even no matter how poor I was and I didn't have the money, I made sure to always have wine for kiddush. Okay, technically you could make kiddush on bread if you don't have the wine. But he said, I made sure to always have wine. In those days, probably it wasn't so easy. And he says like this, Rab Zakkai continues to tell his students, you want to know why I have a long life? I had a very old mother. And this old mother, never ventured outside. She was old. And she recognized how strict I was to only make kiddush over wine. Unbelievable. One time, my mother sold her sheitel, like her covering of her head. And so in order that we should have money, she brought it kiddush hayom. She brought me wine for kiddush to make kiddush. So the reason why it was an old mother is because obviously she's not going to go outside anymore. So she doesn't need a head covering. So that's why her mother sold her sheitel so that he can go have kiddush for wine. Tana, we learned in a brayso, Kishamesa, when this mother died, she left over for her son Rab Zakkai 300 barrels of wine, a nice amount of money. Kishames, when Rabbi Zakkai passed on, he left his children because he had this chumrah, shloishes alafin garbe mayim. He left over his children 3,000 barrels of wine. Probably the reward that God gave him, that he became wealthy, because he was so machbid to do kiddush over wine. So you see, he had three merits. One had to do with prayer, one had to do with his relationships with a friend, and one had to do with Shabbos. The Gemara continues. This is another interesting Gemara, another story. Rav Huna have a asarisa. Rav Huna was one time walking with like a plastic belt, okay? It's like a belt made of reeds or something like that, very cheap. That wasn't his normal belt. He normally had let's say a Gucci belt, a nice leather belt. The koi kame de Rav, and he came in front of his teacher Rav. Amalei, so Rav said, "My hi, what are you doing with this cheap-looking belt?" Amalei, so Rav Huna said, "Loi haveli kiddusha." I didn't have money for kiddush. I didn't have wine for kiddush. I think the aleph stands for wine. I pawned my belt, my regular belt, in order to get money for wine. But I sebei kiddushin, and that's how I had wine for kiddush. So Amalei, so Rav gave him a bracha. Yehi Rava, it should be the will of God. The sitim b'shiroi. You should be covered with beautiful silk clothing. Okay, and he really did become wealthy. But in those days, the men didn't wear the silk clothing. Actually, the women used to wear the silk clothing, and he bought all these silk clothing for his daughters. So the Gemara tells us, Ki ikla Rabba Beret, when his son Rabba became Rabba, the son of Rav Huna, became married that night of the marriage. So after the chasana, after the chuppah, Rav Huna wanted to take a rest. So Rav Huna inish gutzahala. He was a very short individual. When he slept in a couch, he didn't even know he was there. Gana Apuria, he slept on a bed, right by the wedding hall. Asya benase v'kalase, all his daughters and daughter-in-laws, shalcham, they took off their silk clothing, their silk, coverings, v'shad yamana, and they threw it on him, not realizing that he was there. The itim b'shirayim, told he was covered totally with silk clothing. So not only was the bracha came true figuratively that he became rich, but the bracha of Rav came true actually that he ended up with all this clothing covering his body by his daughters and daughter-in-laws, throwing them without realizing that he's sleeping on the bed. Shama Rav Ikbet. Rav became very angry or disturbed by Rav Huna. And listen to why he was disturbed. Omar, he said, "My when I gave you the blessing that you should become wealthy, you should have said, it should happen to you, Rav, because when somebody blesses you, you have to bless them back. Why, says Rashi? Because maybe maybe that moment God was just, anybody asks something, it comes true. This is and then it would happen to me. I would have become wealthy. So Rav was upset that Rav Huna, upon receiving the blessing from him, did not respond. You should have it too. V'chein lamar. Shalu Talmidav es Rabbi Lazar ben Shemua. The students asked Rabbi Lazar ben Shemua, B'meh harachta yamin, with what merit were you, Zoicha, to have a long life? Amalehem, he said, I also had a few things. 3 things I did. Miyamai lo isisi kapendre lebeis haknesses. I never used the Beis HaKnesses for a shortcut. In other words, probably was a shorter distance to his house. If he would cut through the synagogue, he never did it. And never stepped on the heads of a holy people. In other words, if I was walking within a group, I didn't step ahead of them. I walked in the straight line of them. I didn't show that I'm more important than the other people. And then he says, I was a kohen, and I never duchened without a bracha. Now, this is strange because we know that everybody makes a bracha, a kohen makes a bracha, that levarach es Amay Yisrael bi'ahava. So why is Rabbi Lazar ben Shemua saying that I have a special merit? I never duchened without a bracha. So some want to say that the bracha is not, obligated, but others want to say that the reason is that his merit is that when he said bi'ahava, with love, he had such a deep love for all Jewish people that the bracha wasn't like, just said from his mouth, not really meant it. He meant it from the depths of his soul that ba'ahava, he wants to bless the Jewish people. That's what he meant. That was his merit, that he was zeicha for a long life. Shalu Talmidav es Rab Preda. The students asked Rab Preda, why did you zeicha for a long life? Amalehem, so he told him, Miyamai lekadamani odom lebeis medrash. I was always the first one to the shul, and therefore I was the one that opened the lights, and therefore I was zeicha for arichas yamim. And then he says, V'loi mirachti lifnei. You're supposed to read it this way: V'loi chalti mebehema shloi hurma matanoi seha. I did not eat from an animal that they did not take off the zroya l'chaim v'keva. When you slaughter an animal, the mitzvah is to give the foreleg and the cheek and the stomach to the kohen. I never ate from an animal that they did not give those gifts to the kohen. V'loi barachti lifnei kohen, and I didn't make the blessing before kohen. In other words, that if I ate with a kohen, I let him do the benching. I let him lead the zimun. So let's see what this means. The Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, A person's not allowed to eat from an animal that they did not take off the zeroya l'chaim v'akeva. So it's very hard to understand. If everybody's not allowed to do that, so why is that a merit for him that he was zeicha for alirichas yamim? So maybe, and look at this. Rabbi Yitzchak says, if you do eat from an animal that they didn't take off the gifts that belong to the kohen, it's like as if you eat from a produce that they didn't take off trumas and maisrus. The halacha is not like that. So it could be that even though the halacha is not like Rabbi Yitzchak, so technically, even if the butcher did not give the zeroya l'chaim akeva to the kohen, technically you could eat it, no problem. But he had this chumrah, he didn't eat it. V'loi barachti lifnei kohen. I never made a bracha lifnei kohen. In other words, he was a Talmud Chacham. He was the Gadol Hadar, right? Rapreda. And if the kohen was like, let's say they were eating a meal with a kohen, he said, let the kohen lead the benching. So the Gemara says, is that Lamemer de Mal Yusi? Is that something to be proud about? If you're the Gadol Yisrael, you shouldn't ask somebody else, a kohen who's not a Talmud Chacham, to lead the benching. Rabbi Yechon says, Kol Talmud Chacham, any Talmud Chacham, Shemevorech Lefonav, he lets other people lead the benching. Afilu Kohen Gadol Amaretz, even if the one that he's leading the benching is a Kohen Gadol, the greatest Kohen, but he's not a learned person. So the Talmud Chacham thinks he's doing something nice. Oisa Talmud Chacham Chayev Misa. That Talmud Chacham is Chayev Misa. Why? So the Gemara is going to explain that the reason is that people are going to say, what's the big deal to learn Torah? You see, even this Kohen Gadol, who probably has money, he's an Amaretz, he goes before the Talmud Chacham. And that causes people to hate people who are learning. Shenema, the pasuk says, Kol Misanai Evo Mavis. They love death, those that are haters. Al Tikri Misanai, the haters, El Masnie. They cause other people to hate me, says Hashem. They're beloved to death. So the question is, why did Rapreda say that the reason why I was zeicha to a long life, because when I was eating with Kehanim, I would let them lead the benching. Wait a second, if you're the Gadol B'Yisrael, you have to demand that kind of respect, that you should not let them lead the benching. So the Gemara says, Ki kama iu b'shavim. When did Rapreda say is when they were both level? In other words, not really level, but if Rapreda had in front of him a kohen who was also a Talmud Chacham, but not as great as Rapreda in learning, but he was also a Talmud Chacham, Rapreda would say, there's a mitzvah of kiddashtoi, so respect to the kohen, even though technically I'm the bigger Talmud Chacham, I'm going to show respect to the kohen. Because he did that, the Gemara says that's what he felt that was his merit, that he was zeicha to a long life. It's amazing how these Amoraim and Tanoim, they were so understood their life so well that they can pinpoint why they are zeicha a good life. The truth is, we know that when you see somebody having a good life, it cannot be because they did mitzvahs, because we know God doesn't reward mitzvahs in this world. And even the mitzvahs that you say that you get arichas yamim, for example, Mava Sedra, Kibbut Aim, all those that give arichas yamim, they give you a long life, but they don't give you like an amazing long life, like a super long life. So what these Amoraim was zeicha to an extremely long life, and that's what made them stand out, that the students had to ask them the question. Shalu Talmides Nechuniah ben Hakana. They asked Rabbi Nechuniah ben Hakana, the students asked Rabbi Nechuniah ben Hakana, B'meh harachti yamim. What's the secret? Why did you merit a long life? Amalehem, he said to them, Miyamai lo niskabadti bikloin chaveri. I was never honored by the denigration of my friend. In other words, if I won a debate with my friend in learning, I didn't feel great that he lost the debate. In other words, I felt, I didn't, honor myself because he lost the debate. V'loy also al mitasi kilas chaveri. When I had a disagreement with somebody or I had a fight with somebody that day, before I went to sleep, I made sure to be meichel him. And vatra b'mamoini hayisi. And I was easygoing with my money. So the Gemara is going to explain all these things. I didn't honor myself with the denigration of my friend. Kihad Rav Huna B'Amara Akatbe. No, Kihad Rav Huna. This Rav Huna, Durei Mara Akatbe. He was holding a shovel on his shoulder. Rav Huna was holding, let's say, a hoe on his shoulder. And also Rav Chana Bar Chaniloi, V'Kadori Minei. And Rav Chana Bar Chaniloi came and took the shovel or the hoe off Rav Huna's shoulder because, it wasn't respectful that Rav Huna should carry this. Amalei, so Rav Huna said to Rav Chana, if people are accustomed to seeing you carrying a shovel on your shoulder, I let you carry the shovel. But if not, I'm going to be honored by you carrying my shovel, by your denigration. I'm not going to do it. Even though Al-Pi halacha, probably Rav Chana was supposed to do that, not let Rav Huna carry the hoe, the shovel. But if this would cause Rav Chana embarrassment in the place that they were going, Rav Huna would not allow it. Then the Gemara says, now that's an expression of loinis chabadbi b'chloin chaveri. I was careful the sensitivity of my friend's feelings. V'loi also amitase kilas chaveri. If someone cursed me, I never went to bed with it. It's nice to do. Kihad mori marzitra. Marzitra ki have a salek lepuria. Every night when he went to bed, Amar, he said, Sharalei lechol man detzaron. I forgive everyone that caused me pain. And that's why in the nusach of Kriya Shema Shalamita, before you start, you say, I forgive everybody that caused me any type of pain today. Vatram b'mamoina hisi. I was very easygoing with my money. The Amamar Eav vatram b'mamoina have. Eav was easygoing with his money. Shaya miniach pruta lechemini b'mamoina. He would leave, even though, let's say, in the banker or somebody owed him a pruta, a few pennies, he would let him have it. He wouldn't say, "Oh, give me back every dime of the change." And that's that, and of course that habit alone, along with the other habits, shows that he was a flexible person, and that probably made him was zeicha to have a good life, to a long life. This Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana. Shal Rabbi Akiva asked, as Rabbi Nechunya Hagadol, the great Rabbi Nechunya, could be this Rabbi Nechunya HaKoneh that we learned before is the same Rabbi Nechunya HaGadol. But there, it's the students asking him. And here it's Rabbi Akiva particularly asking Rabbi Nechunya Hagadol. It's the same, could be the same person. And he asked this question, Bemeh harachti yamar. Rabbi Akiva asked this Rabbi Nechunya, what merit did you have to zoich a good life? So now, when Rabbi Akiva asked this question, Rabbi Nechunya had like bodyguards. And when they saw Rabbi Akiva ask this question, they felt that Rabbi Akiva is asking this question because they thought Rabbi Akiva was trying to say, you did Averis, Rabbi Nechunya, and therefore, how is it that you have a long life? So they were also Gavze v'Kamochale, the bodyguards and the protectors of Rabbi Nechunya came and started hitting Rabbi Akiva. So he had to run. So Lake Yosef Aresha de Dikla. It's hard to imagine this today, but Rabbi Akiva ran away and he stood on top of a palm tree, and he saw Rabbi Nechunya. Now, Rabbi Akiva's question was, again, every mitzvah that you do, you're not getting arichas yamim, and some you get arichas yamim, but not this really amazing long life. So you have to do a midas chasidus, something like a hiddur mitzvah. So that was Rabbi Akiva wanted to know what hiddur mitzvah, what beautifying a mitzvah over the top did Rabbi Nechunya do? But now he's on a palm tree. Amalei, so he calls out from the palm tree. Rabbi Akiva says, Imnemar kevas, if it says that you have to bring a sheep for the carbon tamid, lama nema echad. Why does the Torah say you have to bring one sheep? Of course, one kevas is singular. You don't have to say echad, one, because kevas is singular. Amalahu, so Rabbi Nechunya answers, Suver Rabbanon hu ushvake. Yeah, I see that he's a very intelligent student, this Rabbi Akiva. Don't hit him. He told his bodyguards, don't hit him. And Amalei, and then he told Rabbi Akiva, echad means miyuchat shebe edroi. You have to take for the sheep the best. For the carbon tamid, you have to take the nicest looking sheep. And that's what echad, the most miyuchat, the most unique and special from the entire flock. So that implies that Rabbi Akiva was hinting to him that you see in the Torah that there's an inyan not just to do a mitzvah, but to do it in a very special, beautiful way. And that's my question to you, Rab Nechuya. What's this that you do in a beautiful way that you merited to have a Rikas Yaman? Amalei, so Rabbi Nechunya says like this: the reason why I merited a long life, he says, Miyamai loy kibalti matanis. I never accepted a gift. And I didn't stay my ground. In other words, I was a very flexible person. I was easygoing with my money. So the Gemara explains, Loi kibalti matanis. What does it mean not to accept a gift? Not only any gift, but kihad Rab Laza. Even Rab Laza, from the Nasi's house, they would send him gifts to this Rab Laza. Loi have a shakel, he did not want to take it. Ki have a mezamnele, when they invited him for a meal, Loi have a asal, he didn't go. Amal lahu, he would tell them, don't you want me to live? The ksiv soine matane, someone who hates gifts, yichya will live a long life. So that was one thing. Rab Zera, the Gemara says, Rab Zera, when they sent him from the Nasi's house, the president's house, they would send him a gift. Loi have a shakel, he did not take it. He have a mezamnele, but when they invited him to the house, azal, he went to the invitation, ate the meal at the Beinasia's house. Omar, he said, when they see me eating at their house, it's not that they're giving me a meal. I could afford my own meal. It's that I'm giving them honor by showing up to their meal, and that I'm giving honor to them. So therefore, I'm not taking a gift. I'm actually giving a gift by showing up. So that's what it means. Don't accept the gift. Don't accept. He hate gifts. And the other thing he said is that I didn't stand my ground. I didn't take exact retribution of somebody who wronged me. The Amar Rava said, "Call Hamabe al midosav," someone who passes over the exact measure of retribution. So he passes over. People wronged him, and he doesn't exact retribution. He lets it slide. Ma'avira mimeno kol pashav. They pass over all his transgressions. Shenema noisi oven. God is forgiving. V'oiv al pasha, and passes over your transgressions. So we darshan the mi noisi oven. To who is God forgiving? The mi she'oiv al pasha. To somebody who passes over the transgressions of other people. If you show yourself that you're not exacting measure from other people that wronged you, then Hashem is not exacting measures from the things that you wronged him. Then the Gemara continues. Sha'al es Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha b'mei harachta yomim. They asked Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha, what merit did you do to have a long life? O Malay. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha said in a jest, Katzti b'chayai. Are you disgusted I'm around? You know, you're asking me why I'm living so long. It seems to be that you don't know. You know, you're sort of upset that I'm still alive. Amalai, so Rebbe said, no, this is Rebbe asking Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha. So Amalai, Rebbe answered Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha, I'm not asking you because I want you to die. It's Tairehi, it's really learning. I need to know what your secret to life, because this is Torah, and this is a lesson for other people. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha said, the reason why I was Zoicha, I merited to a long life, he says, I didn't stare at the form of an evil person. Unbelievable. Even a picture, a statue of an evil person. The Amar Rabbi Yochanan, also la'adam listakel b'tzelem demus adam rasha. You can't look at the form of a person that's a rasha. In other words, don't take a picture of Hitler and just stare at it. It's also to do that. Shenema, the pasuk says, by Elisha Hanavi, Lule Pnei, he was Yehoram was with Yehoshaphat. You have to see the story over there. They invited Elisha because they needed his help. Elisha Hanavi. So Elisha responds to Yehoram, Lule Pnei Yehoshaphat Melech Yehuda. If it wasn't for the fact that Yehoshaphat, the king of Yehuda, is with you, ani noise. It's because of him I'm going to you. I swear I would never even look at you if I would peek at you or even take a glance at you. In other words, he didn't even want to have a look at this Yehoram, the king of Melech Yisrael, of the 10 tribes, because he was a big Rasha. So we see that in the face of an Adam Rasha, you're not permitted to look. And so Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha had this thing that he never looked at the pictures and the forms. even if it wasn't the Adam Rosh himself, just the picture itself could have a bad effect on a person. If you look at the picture of an evil person, your eyes can become dim. You lose your vision. When Yitzchak became old, his eyes became dim from seeing because he saw something. What does it mean? What did Yitzchak see that caused him to become blind? He saw his own son Esav. Because he saw him, that caused his eyes to become dim. So the Gemara says, was it only because he had an evil son? That's why Yitzchak became blind. Rabbi Yitzchak said, the curse of a commoner should not be light in your eyes. Avimelech cursed Sarah, and it came true in her child. It came true in Yitzchak. Avimelech used this phrase, this is yours and it should cover your eyes. That's not what he meant, but the way he expressed himself sounds like this will make you blind. Al tikriksus, don't call it a clothing, alexias anayim, a covering of the eyes. So therefore, this was like a curse, unintentional curse that was lodged from Avimelech against Sarah, and it came true in Yitzchak. So how could you say that Yitzchak became blind because he looked at his son Esav, and we see he became blind because Avimelech cursed him? So the Gemara answers, both of them caused them. The curse that she got from the curse from Avimelech, and Yitzchak became blind because he had to look at his son Esav. Rava Amar Mahacha. Rava has another pasuk saying that if you steer at a rasha, it could hurt your eyesight. Seis pnei rasha lo tov. You're going to take and accept the face of an evil person. Lo tov, it won't be good. And we know vayar lekim or ki tov refers to light. So if you engage the sight of a rasha, it won't be good for your eyesight. Bishas piti rasai. Rabbi Shua ben Karcha passed on. Amalei Rebbe Barcheni. So Rebbe said to Rabbi Shua ben Karcha, please give me a bracha. Amalei, he said, you should reach half my life. In other words, you should have half my arichas yomim. So Rebbe said, ulukuli loy, not your whole life. I mean, you're only giving me half your life. I should reach only half your years. Amalei haboy machrecha behema yiro. Your children that come after you are shepherds. In other words, you have children that could take you over. So you don't need to live a long life. In fact, Rabbi Shua ben Karcha felt that if he blessed Rebbe to live a long life, he might see his children die in his lifetime without ever taking over the kingdom, the Nesias, the presidency. So he only blessed them that you should live only up to half my life. Then the Gemara says, Avua bar Iyu, Minyamin bar Iyu. Two brothers, Avua and Minyamin, the son of Ar Iyu. Chad said, Tasili, I have a merit, the loistakel b'kusi. I never steered at a kusi. Kusi is somebody that distorted the Torah in Torah Shabbat, did not believe in Torah Shabbat Peh. There are a certain type of rasha that he didn't want to stare at. So he said, that's a merit for me. I never made a partnership with a kusi. So I looked at a kusi, I lived amongst them, but I never made a business partnership with them. And that was, no issue to do that if you set up the plans a certain way. But that was their merit. Shalu Talmid, one more question. Shalu Talmid Ves Rabbi Zeh, yamin. What will you zeicha for long life? Amalei lo yamai lo hikpadi b'soich beisi. I never got angry in my house. I never walked in front of somebody who was greater than me. I didn't think of learning when I was in a messy place. In other words, in an alleyway that had manure or something like that in it. It's makom tuma, and makom not clean. I never went four amas without thinking about Torah, or without wearing my tefillin. I never slept in a base of medrash. Lo yishen is keva, not a permanent sleep. Lo yishen is arai, not a little nap. Even though I lived and learned in a base of medrash, technically I'm allowed to take a nap. I didn't do that either. Lo yisasti b'tekol chaveri. I wasn't joy when I out debated my friend in the denigration of my friend. I never called my friend by his a nickname that everybody calls him. His regular nickname, his family nickname. In other words, I was careful to call people by their original source name, which has no other connotation to it. So he had a whole bunch of things that he attributed of why he lived a long life. Zog the Mishnah. A basic knesses that bombed out. Let's say you have a basic knesses, there was a fire, you have the building intact, you're not allowed to give a hesped inside of it because it was once a shul. You can't just use it for non-mitzvah purposes. You can't use it because it's a big place to stretch out your ropes. In other words, to stretch out your ropes, your netting ropes. The ain't partial you can't spread your nets inside of it. You can't put fruits on its roof to dry out. You still can't make it a shortcut. It's a base medrash, it's a shul that's burned up and nobody's using it anymore. I will destroy your holy places. And so it still calls it holy places after it's destroyed. A basic knesses, a shul takes its holiness even after it's destroyed. But the Gemara says, if grass starts growing into the building, don't clean it up because we want people to be distraught over it, to remind themselves to rebuild a new shul. If you clean it up, so people will say, oh, it looks fine, so they won't build a new shul. So that's it. If the grass grows in it, let it be. You can't be lightheaded in a shul. You're not allowed to eat a meal. You're not allowed to drink in them. We go to Chaf Chesed Bebeis. You're not allowed to, put on makeup or, comb your hair or do other things that you're dressing yourself. You're not allowed to exercise in the shul. You can't go in there to cool off if it's sunny outside or if it's rainy outside. You can't make a big eulogy if one person died. Aval, because it's a small levaya, you can't make there. Aval korim bahen, you're allowed to read, learn there. Even though it's a shul and it's meant only for davening, you could read chumash there. V'shayim behem, you can learn mishnayos. Umaspidim behen hesped shel rabbim, and you're allowed to make a hesped when it's the hesped, let's say, of the rabbi. Then you're allowed to make, because there you're going to have a lot of people showing up, and you need this big hall, and the shul was the big hall. Rabbi Yehuda says, Masai, when is this all talking about? Be Yeshuvin, when the base shul is active. Alva b'churbanan, if it was destroyed and it's a burned out building, manichin oisen v'oilim ben vasamin, let it be and let a grass grow there. And don't tear up the grass because we want people to be distraught. So, who's talking about grass over here? That Rabbi Yehuda is responding about a destroyed shul. So Gemara says something's missing in this brisa. Chasure mechasram b'hachichtani. This is what's missing in the brisa. A shul mechabdenoise. You have to constantly sweep a shul, keep it clean. Umabitza, and you put water. In those days, they didn't have a tiled floor. They had a dirt floor. So make sure that it's damp enough by putting water on it so the dirt doesn't rise. And also that grass should not grow on it. So that's the way you should make a regular shul. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Emasai b'yeshuvim, when it's a normal shul. Ava b'churbanan, if it's a destroyed shul, then just the opposite. You want grass to grow into the shul. Manichnoi allows you let the grass grow into the shul because nobody's using it anyway. And only by Yisovin, if grass grows there, lo yitlish, don't tear it out. Because people who pass by the shul, they'll remember, oh, we once had a shul there. Now look, grass is coming up all over the place. And that will encourage them to put together a new monies to rebuild the shul. New Gemara, two more Gemaras. Amar Rabasi said like this. We're talking about a destroyed shul, right? Imagine those destroyed shul on the East New York, okay? It's burned out, a former shul. So the din is, he says that those shuls in Bavel and anywhere in Chutz La'aretz, they're made on condition. And therefore, even though it's destroyed, it still has a little bit of kedusha in there. You can't be lightheaded in there. going into this empty, bombed out building. Uman nihu cheshbonis. You're not allowed to even do accounting there, accounting work into that place, because it once was a shul. But everything else you could do in that place, because this shul is destroyed. And only good shuls are going to move to, only shuls that are active and the building is nice will be taken in its entirety and moved to Israel when Mashiach comes. But if it's a bombed out shul and shul burnt down, then it's going to remain there. So even in that place, while it's there, you should not make, do kalas roish there. Amar Rab Asi says, you have a shul and somebody goes in and starts doing bookkeeping there. Malinin boy as a mace. They'll overnight there a dead body. What does that mean? Malin and salkadaitich, the guy's going to die. Loisagi de lavhachi. What it means is that if they use the shul as a place that they do bookkeeping, voting, or something like that, in the end, there's going to be a plague that they're not going to have a place to bury dead people. A lot of people are going to die at one time, and they're going to store the bodies in this shul. So basically, the Gemara is like putting you like the fear that a person has to, in a shul, should not do any things that have not relevant to a mitzvah. A regular shul, you're not allowed to make yourself, beautify yourself, comb your hairs and stuff like that. A chacham and his Talmud, the students learning there all day, are permitted to do that. The Amar Shul, my Bey Rabbanim, base of the Rabbanim. Why is it called the house of Rabbanim? What is a house of Rabbanim? The house of Rabbanim. The shul is called the house of the Rabbanim. And therefore, since they spend most of the time in the shul, they are permitted to, do other things that normal people would not be allowed to do, which probably means combing themselves and, putting underarm deodorant or anything like that, that you normally don't do in a shul. They're permitted to do so. One more piece. You're not allowed to go there if you're just protecting yourself from the inclement weather. They were going to ask Rava a question. So Ravina and Rav Ada were on their way to Rava. They were talking something over. Also, all of a sudden, a flash rain came. So they walked into a shul, into a synagogue, to protect themselves from the rain. Amro, they said, "Hi, the alina lebekinishna, that we go into a shul to protect ourselves from the rain." It's because really, technically, if you're just protecting yourself from the rain, you're not allowed to go into a shul. But it's la mishamitra. We're not just going to protect ourselves from the rain. Since we're talking and learning, and in order for us to discuss the topic and the learning clearly, we have to be inside a building. To learn, you have to have a clear mind, like the day that the north wind blows. In other words, that we walked into the shul, not because we didn't want to get wet, is because since we're discussing and learning, and with the rain coming, it will disturb our train of thought. Therefore, we're permitted to walk into the building despite the rain, but only under those conditions. But if it wasn't that, just protect yourself from the rain, you're not allowed to do that. And one final piece of the Gemara. Amalei Rav Acha beited Rava Ravashi. Rav Acha, son of Rava, said to Ravashi, let's say you have to call somebody out of the shul. What should you do? Should you walk into the shul and call him out? Amalei, so he said to him like this, if he knows how to learn, first, go into the shul, say a halacha to yourself, and then call your friend out. V'itanahu, if you know mishnayis, say a mishnah. V'karahu, if you know how to read a pasuk, say a pasuk. But don't just walk into the shul and call him out. You have to stop for a minute, say a pasuk or a mishnah or a halacha. V'iloi, if you don't know anything, you can't read Hebrew, tell the children that are in the shul, tell me a pasuk. Iname, if you can't even do that, there's no children around, and he doesn't know how to learn, doesn't know Hebrew, what should he do? Nishe purte, he should delay a little bit, v'neikem, and then get up. In other words, go into the shul, sit for a moment, just by being and absorbing the spiritual energy of the shul for a minute, and then get up and call your friends from the shul. So these are halachas of what to do of a shul particularly that destroyed, and even shul that's not destroyed. Okay.
Beautiful.
Very